Well, let's stay on the topic and bring into the conversation right now retired General Tom Lawson. From 2012 to 2015, he served as Canada's Chief of Defence Staff and is also a former Deputy Commander of NORAD. General Lawson, thank you for being with us tonight.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Listen, I'd like to start with your reaction to that tweet. Again, it's from MP Michael Chong, who said hard questions need to be asked about the state of the armed forces if Canada must rely on a U.S. jet to take down an unauthorized object in Canadian skies. What's your reaction to that?
Well, as someone who cares very deeply about defense, anytime any of our elected officials decide it's time to take a good close look at defense, I'm for it. What they find is that defense is in great need of more resources, better equipment, and more people. But I actually think the MP has the wrong issue here. Canada has new fighters already on the way, and they've spent a lot of money keeping these ones upgraded. They're up to the task. And the fact that it was our American friends, partners in NORAD, who shot this down is just representative of the fact that we have a really good relationship with them in a NORAD agreement that's been around like it is for 65 years.
Is it fair to say, though, that perhaps too many Canadians are complacent about Canadian defense, thinking that the country is isolated on top of the U.S., that really there are no harms that could come to this country?
Yeah, I think that is fair. Canada and its elected officials have nearly always taken a discount on defense. And why not? I mean, we're up in the cold upper left corner of every map, probably less threatened than most nations. But the fact of it is, Canadians expect that their military will be used by the government to move into problem areas around the world, play the away game, if you will. And whenever we decide to do that, we typically find that if it's been a while since we've done that, then our forces are largely under-resourced. So yes, I think that this is another really good time to take a look at the military, and if it's in the state we need it to be, I think we'll find that it is not.
Okay. Let's move on now to these unauthorized objects. One we know is a Chinese balloon. The other three have yet to be officially identified, I guess is a good way of putting it. Do you suspect that they are all Chinese balloons? Could they be anything else?
The answer is they could be something else. It'd be embarrassing to find out that any of these actually originated on North American territory. But I suspect that these have all come via the stratosphere from the West and likely from China. It could be wrong. That is, and I think our elected officials are being correctly very hesitant as they gather up the shrapnel and what's left over from shooting these things down via the technological footprints and fingerprints. They're going to find out who sent these across. And then there's going to be some tough questions to be answered.
Okay, can you talk to us about the kind of security threat these present then? Because again, balloons, unidentified objects, how do they present any type of threat to Canada and to the U.S.?
Right. So the threats that, the typical Canadian thinks of are threats to oneself. And it's a reasonable reaction. These balloons, none that we've seen, carry any sort of kinetic threat, explosives, nuclear devices, anything at all. Unless you happen to be out in your backyard when one of these things comes down, they present no threat, no direct physical threat. However, in the long game of intelligence, they do. It's another airborne asset of a nation, certainly the first one, China, which comes across relatively difficult to detect and gathers electronic information and intelligence and pictures. And there's a certain amount of maneuverability that allows them to spend more time over top of interesting sites than satellites. So that's an intelligence game, and that does speak to the security of Canada and the United States, and it's something that should concern us militarily. But once we get from the military threat, what we're really into is diplomacy. All nations in the world understand sovereignty, and it's remarkable that the Chinese have decided to have a program in which they loose balloons up on the stratosphere into the territory that belongs to those people who they would also, I think, like to have a good relationship with so that they can trade with them.
So watching this at a distance as you are now being retired, what would your advice be to the Canadian government as to how to proceed?
Well, I think they're taking the right steps. NORAD, this is their bread and butter. And the commander of NORAD is answering to the Prime Minister and the President and other elected officials in tweaking his sensors now to be looking very carefully for these things. It's, it was not a threat that NORAD was expecting, because in terms of kinetics, NORAD was optimized to intercept fast-moving things that brought in explosives. So they're doing the right things, and they're now speaking very carefully. And prior to these balloons being detected last week, they were making the right statements regarding the upgrade of NORAD sensors in a way that would provide an optimized sensor system for anything approaching the North American sovereign soil.
And of course, Canadian forces very much involved in retrieving what is left of two of those objects. So we'll be watching it very closely. For now, though, General Lawson, really appreciate the time. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.